Well, I would like to talk to you today about some of the recent events that you've been involved with. You've been very busy and done some very cool things recently. Before
Mhm.
we do, just in case somebody has been living under a rock, can you tell the listener who you are and how you got involved with what you do now, which is not only neurosurgery, but also working with people on the carnivore diet?
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in medicine and in human nutrition as well. It just goes hand in hand with health. If you're not eating the right things, you're not going to be healthy. And it's as simple as that. And so I always played sports, I always liked sports, and always wanted to excel in athletics. And so I was interested in nutrition and eating the right way and all that stuff. You don't really think about it too much. Even then, I was learning, okay, you're supposed to eat this and you're supposed to do that, but I wasn't as focused on it, and I didn't realize just how big of an impact it has on your health and your athletic performance, especially. But I taking biology and botany and cancer biology and all these different classes, and we're just learning that we evolved as carnivores. We're only eating meat, and plants have defense chemicals, and that's how they defend themselves. This is ubiquitous throughout the entire plant kingdom. That's why there is a plant kingdom. They haven't been completely eaten away to extinction because they have defenses. And even though they're stationary and they're just a sitting duck and prey for all bugs and insects and animals that would want to eat them, they don't die. They actually do very well, and that's because they have these internal defenses, most of which are chemical, most of which are toxic, poison sort of defenses. But are others as well. And plants make about 1 million different chemicals. Most of those are to defend themselves against predation. And just learning all this and learning how toxic plants were. And I finally had a professor who was just instilling this in us in my cancer biology class and talking about all the carcinogens and everything like that were in plants, in normal plants, not in the pesticides, in the plants themselves, because that's how they survive. We put pesticides on so insects can't eat them, but they make pesticides so that insects and animals can't eat them. And so they actually make a lot more than that. And so then the pesticides we spray on them. And even then I was just like, well, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And my professor just sort of looked at us and he just gave us a funny look and said, I don't eat salads, I don't eat vegetables, I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. So I was like, right, screw plants. And I just stopped. And my health improved, my athletic performance improved dramatically. But even then, I still didn't attribute it to necessarily that. I stopped drinking at the same time during the rugby season, and I sort of attributed it to that. I'm like, wow, I feel so much better, and of course that makes a huge difference. But I sort of thought it was the drinking, and it wasn't until years later that I realized that there was this 5 year period that I just felt bulletproof, like just a superhuman. And I wasn't drinking during the rugby season after that, but I never felt like that. So I was like, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know how I lost that. And I chalked it up to age. Maybe I wasn't pushing myself as hard, even though I was. And I just didn't know about it. I just didn't know what happened. And then when I was in my late 30s, I was 38, just turned 38. And I sort of came across information that said, no, humans actually just are carnivores as a species. It's just what we evolved on. One of the immutable laws of biology, which is a hard science, is laws of adaptation. If your species has been exposed to something for millions of years, then you are going to adapt to it. And so if we've been eating meat for millions of years, then we're obviously adapted to it, well adapted to it. And we only started introducing plants and incorporating plants in our diet very recently, 10,000 years that since we've eaten plants into a large degree in places that have had agriculture. Very little before that, if any, especially like in the Arctic Circle during the ice ages. What plants are there to eat? There are none, right? You eat animals. And so we are well adapted to eating meat. We are not very well adapted to eating plants, and plants have defense chemicals. Animals have defensive characteristics, kinetic defenses. They can run away, they can fight you, they have horns, they have teeth, they have claws, they can physically fight back or run away or hide. Plants can't. They're just sitting there, right? So different defenses. So once you get an animal, you can eat it pretty safely. Something might have a poison sac or something like that, or certain organs may be something you need to avoid. but the meat is generally fine. It's not the same with plants. And so that's just something that I've just come to realize, is that humans are carnivores. That's the kind of animal we eat, and we're adapted to eating meat. There's nothing in meat that's dangerous to us. And there are a lot of things dangerous to us in plants, and we are not adapted to them. And then I started thinking about that from the view of a doctor, and everything just started slotting into place. Everything made sense about why this massive rise in the prevalence of chronic diseases over the last 50 years, over the last century. Certain things that just didn't exist a century ago, now they're one of the mainstays in modern medicine, like Alzheimer's and heart disease. These things just weren't even recognized as diseases all that long ago, not very long ago. Now they're the main killers, now the main afflictions that we come across. So I think that that's directly related to eating an inappropriate diet for our species. And that's what I want to do. I want to get people aware of that, and so that they can eat a species appropriate diet and they can be well, and they don't have to have these illnesses and sickness. They don't have to be beholden to the multi-trillion-dollar food industry and the multi-trillion-dollar pharmaceutical industry, that they can just live their life and keep their money for themselves and doing things that make them happy and have a long, healthy, happy life. That's my goal.
Dude, that's awesome. I love that. I think I've told you about one of the kiddos that I train. He's like 15 years old. He does motocross at a really high level. And he was texting me earlier this week about plants. And he was like, well, remind me again, what are the harms of plants? You could tell some adult was like pressing him on this topic. And I was like, well, plants can be toxic in different ways. Here's a few chemicals like oxalates and lectins and, all kinds of phytochemicals that they have. And it can be harmful in different ways. And I sent him our original episode that you and I did, where you explained this really well. You could tell this adult was saying, like, give me 10 reasons why plants are really bad for you. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to take the time to fight somebody through a 15-year-old kid about the harms of plants. But here's the episode we did. Like have this guy watch it. It's an hour long and it'll be fine. He immediately texts back and said, the guy said that like there's tons of people out there making videos, and he can find different videos of people talking about the benefits of plants. And I'm just like, this guy didn't even take the time to consider the content. Like, listen to you. You're a neurosurgeon who's been in basically like college since you were age 15. You won't even take the time to watch the video. And it's like, that's how far we've drifted away from what you're explaining, which is our natural birthright, which is eating a species appropriate diet.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, if I can find somebody that says something else. Great. Watch them too. Then watch me or watch someone else, and then compare the arguments and see how they stack up, right? Because people would say, well, there's all these plants and they're so great, and there's this vitamin and mineral, and isn't that wonderful? And I agree, there are those vitamins and minerals. That's lovely. But there's also these poisons, right? So that's not so lovely. So you get the bad with the good. And you can't just cherry pick one and say, oh, this is the only one I want to focus on. No, you have to look at the whole thing. And then you look at, well, more plants are better. People that eat more fruits and vegetables are better. Okay, which fruits and vegetables, right? I mean, even vegans. I mean, that's the thing. There's all these different hills that the vegans try to die on. They try to no. Well, this is it, and they try to fight. And they for a while there, when I first sort of started talking about this stuff, there was this rank denial that plants had any sort of defense mechanisms. And then it was just like, and then one of them happened to just open a botany book and go, oh, shit, okay, all right, well, okay, well, so we're dead ass wrong about that. But they started to make other excuses, and then it's like, well, okay, yeah, they're poisons, but let's just pretend that they're beneficial somehow, and that's obviously garbage. And now they're going to the whole evolutionary argument, where it's just like, well, yes, we evolved eating meat, and no, we're not herbivores, but that doesn't mean that it's actually good for us. Like, no, that's exactly what that means. That's exactly what that means. That's a law. That's an immutable law of biology, is that of adaptation. And there's so many other pieces of information as well to back that up. But the fact remains that these defense chemicals exist, and you can look them up. They're readily available for anyone to see. And now people say, okay, well, yes, there are all these defense chemicals, but the ones that I want you to eat and all these, because plants have these defense chemicals. Okay, which ones are safe to eat? How much of each one? And which ones do you need to get nutrition? You can't get full nutrition. You cannot get full nutrition from a vegan diet. Cannot, right? So first of all, that's an inappropriate diet. That's a bad diet if you can't even get basic nutrients from it. How can any nutritionist argue for a diet that is lacking in nutrients? That makes no sense. They should lose their license at that point. I mean, it makes no damn well lose their nutritionist card anyway. If you're arguing for a diet that is deficient in nutrients, you should not be allowed to give nutritional advice. That's insane. But now they're saying, well, you should eat plants. More plants equals better. Okay, but which plants, right? You can't just say more plants. More any plant, more hemlock, more nightshade, more tobacco, more heroin, which bloody plants, right? And then you talk to these same people, and this is part of, the debate that I had with a vegan guy, which was, sort of a couple weeks ago. It hasn't come out yet. But, it's a bit frustrating because this guy just bounces around from topics and he tries to nitpick, little things on the things you talk about, but then leaves glaring holes on his arguments, right? So he'll try to nitpick on just the littlest things here, which aren't necessarily valid anyway. But then he'll say, well, look at this Inuit thing and they have heart disease. And it's like, okay, is that with Inuit that are only eating a meat-based diet? They're like, oh, well, yeah. I was like, well, where does it say that? It doesn't say that anywhere in the damn paper. So why are you bringing it up? That's not relevant. And, and other sorts of things of that nature. What was another one that they did? Yeah, he said something about, we'll look at these animals in the zoo and they get these diseases and they get cancer, and the most cancer actually goes in the animals that are eating meat. It's like, okay, are those ones only eating their natural diet, or are they being fed other things? Well, I mean, presumably, yeah, they probably are. Where does it say that? Where does it say they're only eating their natural diet? Like, it doesn't. So, like, again, this study is useless. I don't care what happens to zoo animals that are fed crap. I'm worried about what happens when they eat their normal diet in proper conditions. And also, even if they are getting, some small prevalence of illness on their natural diet, well, feed them kibble and see what happens. It's going to get way worse, right? So, it's a bit silly, but one of the things that he was talking about, he was trying to nitpick this study with the Maasai, which it was a book, really. It was like 120 pages long, with the Maasai and the Akikuyu back in the 1930s. Because the thing is, all these studies, they compare against the norm. The norm is sick. The norm is people eating a standard processed food diet, which is processed carbs and sugar and plants, right? It's plant food. It's processed plant food, not processed meat. It's processed plant food. And the majority of calories that Americans get and Westerners get are plant-based. So we are already plant-based. Well, we need to go
Yep,
plant-based. We are plant-based.
we are.
We are plant-based. That's the problem. And so they go, so these things say, oh, more fruits and vegetables. Okay, well, more fruits and vegetables means you're replacing the processed grains and carbs and sugars and seed oils, and you're eating more whole food. Okay, and you get a benefit. I'm shocked. Also, you get healthy user bias, and you improve in a lot of other ways as well. And there was a study with 400,000 people in the UK that showed that vegetables and fruits and vegetables didn't actually benefit from a cardiovascular disease rate. Now, when accounting for healthy user bias and all the different sorts of confounders, and they found that, okay, well, maybe there's an improvement in all-cause mortality. But again, how much of this is based on confounders and healthy user bias and people just doing things that are more healthy for them? And so, if you want to actually look at what's better, excluding meat or excluding plants or whatever, a whole food meat-based diet with a whole food plant-based diet, that's what you need to look at. We don't have studies looking at that except for this one with the Akikuyu and the Maasai, because the Maasai largely eat meat, milk, and blood, and the Akikuyu largely eat plants. They're largely vegetarian. They'll have some milk, but I mean barely any. Out of a population of 750,000 people back in the late 1920s, they estimated that they only would produce about 100 gallons of milk, right? So it's just nothing, right?
Mm.
And so they have a bit of meat every now and then and some things, but they found that the Akikuyu were much less healthy, had horrible development, were much shorter, on average 5 inches shorter, than the males of the Maasai tribe. Had worse teeth, worse dentition, worse health, diabetes, and bone deformities, and so many other health issues. They were 50% weaker than the male Akikuyu, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And the females were also less healthy. And one guy who tried to critique that on TikTok, he said that actually the females of the Akikuyu tribe were the healthiest out of all the groups. That's complete and utter garbage. They were healthier than the male Akikuyu because they ate a different diet. The males ate more grains and millet and all that sort of stuff, and the females ate more leafy greens and things as well. So they had a more diverse plant-based diet, and they were more healthy as a result of that. And but they were more healthy than the male of their own tribe. They were not healthier than the females, and the healthiest of all were the male warrior caste in the Maasai, who ate the most meat of all of them.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was completely wrong. And the interesting part about that study is that the Maasai and the Akikuyu live in the same area, so they intermarry, right? And so they're genetically similar. Now the author said, like, well, we don't know how long they've been here, we don't know how long they've been intermarrying, we don't know how far back that goes. Fair enough, but they have been in that area for quite some time, and they're both living in the same area. And the thing is that when you have people coming over from the Akikuyu into the Maasai tribe, and Maasai over to the Akikuyu, there is enough going back and forth that should start leveling the playing field. But you have these genetics going there and getting poor nutrition, and then that's stunting their growth or increasing their growth. Now, he was trying to say that, well, that doesn't count as a plant-based diet. So, well, that's not the plant-based diet I would argue for. It's like, well, no, look, the studies that you're touting that say that a plant-based diet and more fruits and vegetables are good and less meat is good and more plants are good are very vague. They're not saying your diet that you picked, that's perfect vegan diet with all these supplements that you want. That's not what these studies say. These studies are saying whatever plants you want to eat, as long as you eat more plants and less meat, that's what benefits people. Well, here we go. We have these population studies with hundreds of thousands of people and looking at their overall health and development. And they found that, wow, actually less meat and more plants is really detrimental to people's health and development. And so, but I just thought more plants and less meat was a problem. I thought that more meat was going to make you more sick, and it didn't. It does the exact opposite. And so there's always these little ways of trying to change, move the goalposts and change what we're actually arguing about. But that's always how it is. You're going to get these people out there. And so, my advice to your client is just don't worry about it. Like, who gives a shit? That guy doesn't want to actually improve his health. He doesn't have to.
Fine.
Right.
Fine.